Welcome to a Nevada Historical Society Docent Council presentation on the history of the Docent Council, now entering its 40th year. Council Vice President Linda Burke has been researching the Council files, notebooks, minutes, and pictures to produce this presentation. All of her work will be used to create an NHS Docent Council collection for others to use. Note, if you have more information or corrections, please contact Linda. So sit back and enjoy 40 years of the Nevada Historical Society Docent Council.
Hello, everybody. Today I am going to present to you Old Friends and Memories, a personal look back at the Docent Council. Peter Bandaraga began the Docent Council shortly after his appointment as the director in 1980. He modelled it on the Docent Council in the Ventura County History Museum, where he worked prior to his arrival here at the Nevada Historical Society. The Ventura Museum had 100 docents doing gallery and downtown tours. They ran the gift shop, helped in collections in the library with cataloguing, and they conducted an outreach program. Here you can see Peter Bandaraga, Dr. Peter Bandaraga, presenting me with my graduation certificate in 1997. And the other picture details a very important tea set, which was a ceremony that the tea ceremony lasted in our Docent Council as a tradition for many years. More about that later. When he arrived at the Nevada Historical Society, Dr. Peter and Bandaraga found Phil Earle, the current curator of exhibits, doing gallery tours, which in his words, Peter's words, he thought was a waste of time and money. Peter was interviewed in 1995 by some of the docents, so some of his words I have heard him speak. These are some of the early docents planning the meeting, planning the future Docent Council. There were some docents already, or some volunteers already at the museum, and he recruited these. And then by word of mouth and public service announcements in the press and on the radio, he got out the news that the museum was looking for help. Docents later volunteered at fairs like these. The first classes were held in May 1982. There was another class in the fall. These early docents were trained mostly by the staff and by UNR history faculty. Nancy Pepin, an artist of some standing, was the education coordinator for the then Sierra Nevada Museum of Art on Court Street. She instructed docents on dealing with tours and children. The first graduation was in 1982. The first speaker was Dr. Cynthia Irwin Williams, a distinguished archaeologist of the prehistoric American Southwest. She was a groundbreaker for women in archaeology, and she actually died in Reno in 1990. Rather tragic. By 1984, the Docent Council was self-sufficient. It had 51 members. Barbara Harmon was the first president, complete with a bylaws in committee headed by Charles Breeze. These bylaws were begun in 1982, and as a matter of interest, bylaws are usually revised every 10 years. Docents of the 80s are listed here, and you can see the first graduates. There were two classes in 1982 in May and September, and then other docents, you may be able to pick out some names that are familiar. Our dear Laverne Burmeister was one of the graduates in 1986. Marjorie Fordham was a graduate in 1984. Training was serious business, and by 1864 consisted of an annual 9-week fall event. You can see there was this program put out. June Sherwood is featured here doing a tour of the gallery on the cover. And here is the program. DC meetings were arranged around this program, which consisted of weekly talks, tours, and field trips, and which culminated often in a graduation tea. Here's the 1984 docent class. Oh, I should have said that yellow, someone must have wanted to point out polythigmen because they have power highlighted it. Now look at this class, very interesting. We have a familiar face here. I wanted to ask her about it. Maybe some of you can. Arlene Lefebvre graduated in the docent class of 1985. Now the tea ceremony, very important. This would become a tradition for over 25 years. It was even featured in the newspaper of the time. And here it says that the docents used a famous silver set once owned by the Tsar of Russia. Now, I did look into this a little bit, and all I could find was that the tea was of Mayer silver, and I don't know whether the Mayer was a family name or the people who owned it. Maybe somebody can let me know. The tea service was gifted to us or donated to us by Jean Davis, pictured here. The tea lasted until the last fall class of 9 weeks, which was ended in 2007. And the last tea was around 2008. In some of the DCBs, there's a request for donations of cups as the tea sets were becoming worn. Maybe Jean, she took her precious collection home and the others got a little bit broken and damaged. The tea team was quite a traditional joining for the hospitality group. You can see here Jane Olsen, Judy Isley, Laverne Burmeister pictured, as well as Jean Davis. Some of you may even have one of these teacups as a reminder, because they were given away at Baldini's at the annual Marjorie Fordham luncheon in 2017. The training was so well respected that then current President Jim Lesniak presented a talk on it to the Nevada Museum Association meeting in 1995. The 9-week training continued until 2007. 4-hour sessions with a mini history course at UNR open to all. But by 2011, due to the recession, the training, which exists to this day, had become a half-day introduction. In 1988, there were 65 docents. By 1996, 70, 48 by 2001. In January 2004, there were 90, and 2021, there are 63. I wanted you to have a look at the activities of the docents because they haven't really varied that much over the years. These are chairs for 1984 and 1997. Some of them are rather interesting, as we can tell the passage of time. We can see that there was a great interest in producing exhibits in the 1980s. We also have bulletin boards and mailing or telephone chairs. We have logo orientation or logo development in the 1980s. So just a few of interesting chairs. We don't seem to have as many chairs today. And we have more prominence with the editor of the Bee as becoming a significant part of the society. Tours began immediately after training. Everybody did tours upon the completion of their training. The changing gallery exhibits also became a key focus for both the hospitality and the organisation committees of the Docent Council. This is from the minutes of the Docent Council meeting, February 1983. Helping with exhibits takes priority over all other museum tasks. And indeed, Peter Bandaraga stresses that, the importance of the docents in helping in the changing gallery particularly. Everyone was invited to the board meetings where committee chairpersons gave their reports. The first printed minutes are from February 3rd, 1983. There were 72 tours that year with 3,067 participants. Docents even pressed clothes for the gallery. There was restoration of the quilt and doll collection. Peter asked the Docent Council to take over the summer folk fair, and many were trained by the curators in collection processing. The repair of the wiki-up was undertaken. Demonstrations of basket making were presented. Kathy Ralston became very adept at this, apparently. A docent, Bob Filippi, made the Reno Arch pictured here, with Betsy doing a tour. A retired engineer, he also made the base for the miner's bathtub and the mount for the hydraulic mining nozzle in the gallery. On this side of the arch, you can see that he built it and later became a docent in 2009. Another docent contributed to the Lost City display. Meetings of the Docent Council were originally on Mondays at 1 p.m, later Wednesdays at 1 p.m. The store always required assistance. There was a downtown gallery at 135 South Sierra Street at the Reno Tahoe Visitors Centre, which lasted from fall 1982 through November 1987, and which had 36,000 visitors in that time, and 700 to 800 in the summer of 1984. I think that was a time when gaming was at its peak. Docents gave tours and answered questions. I love this picture of two of our emeritus docents. There was a downtown gallery in the council building again in 2001 for a short time. School tours was the responsibility of the Education Committee of the Docent Council from April 1983. They sent letters to schools and teachers promoting visits. Docents early on were encouraged to donate artefacts that children could pass around and handle. Jean Gregory donated chaps she had worn as a child growing up in McDermott. I wish we could have those today. The outreach program was begun by Dorothy Breeze in February 1986, when after a financial crisis or crunch from the Washoe County School District provided a potential loss in educational programming and flooding stranded the school buses where they were housed, there was thought that there may be no buses for field trips. So if they can't come to us, we'll go to them. But the outreach, or later History on Wheels, eventuated. Docents wrote programs, originally in slides, then PowerPoint, and now we're doing them virtually, hopefully. Mostly directed at elementary schools and senior homes, they have been given to middle school and high schoolers, clubs and scouting troops. In 1997, the Nevada Humanities Committee gave a grant to publish a brochure, here pictured. Scripts were written by docents. Some of you may have seen the handwritten cards in the Native American box by Edo Sabini. Kathy McKee and Judy Isley, John Gomes, Dick Kritz, Jeannie Nichols and Mona Dybel all contributed to the scripts of the programs that we still have. And here is my good friend John Gomes doing one of his last outreach presentations at Colin Ranch Elementary School. I'm not sure of the date, poor John couldn't remember, but he has donated his hat to us, the one that he's wearing in this picture, which he wore in the 1940s. Early on, docents were rewarded for their service with silver pins, danglers came early, honour roll recognition and special events. There were docents of the month, like these two. There was even recognition by the Nevada Department of Museums and History for volunteer service in 1988 at a state banquet. A trophy was given. We still have the trophy, but unfortunately it's lost its beautiful seal. Also at the time, Wally Reed, a volunteer who was not a trained docent, was given a certificate of commendation by the American Association for State and Local History at their meeting in Raleigh, North Carolina. He spent 40 to 45 hours a week in the photography and map collection. Reminds you of some of our docents today. In July 2017, through the auspices of Carol Coleman, the Nevada Historical Society received a certificate of commendation from Arttown. 2 staffers from Senator Catherine Cortez Masto presented this award. In January 1988, docent Marjorie Fordham died suddenly. She was a retired teacher and the co-chair with Jean Gregory of Education. She joined the Docent Council in 1984, completed 12 tours during training and had done 223 by the time she had died. She also helped with training, went on outreach programs, scheduled tours and docents, and with bulk mailings. Although not a native Nevadan, Marjorie had come in contact with many famous Nevadans, Key Pittman, Datsulali, and Jim Butler. She travelled Nevada frequently, made hair-raising trips up Kings Canyon to Lake Tahoe, and even flew in a mail plane from Lone Pine to Reno, where it landed on what is today Washoe Golf Course, so that she would not be late for her university class. And she enlivened many of her tours with these stories. She was known as an authority on Native Americans. It was decided at the November 7th, 1988 Docent Council meeting that a yearly award named the Marjorie Fordham Memorial Award, upon which the name of a deserving docent would be engraved. A committee was appointed to make the selection, and the first Marjorie Fordham winners were Barbara Harmon and Dorothy Breeze in 1989. Marjorie's daughter Kathy and her daughter-in-law Prella Fordham were in attendance. Other awardees have included these lovely ladies and our present-day tributes, Kitty and Russell. We have an early honour reception here at the holiday. The original luncheon was held at the Palais de Jade, but over the years, luncheons have been held at the Gold and Silver, the Sparks Nugget, the Holiday and the Peppermill, Louis Bass Corner, the Meadowood Courtyard and Sage Creek. For many years, they were at the Glen Hare Occupational Centre at Reno High, then at Rapscallions and Baldini's. Here we have some more award winners. Up the top, Sam and Carolyn Chapman, John Gomes and Jim Lesniak. Some attendees, and a more recent luncheon with some people that may be familiar to us. The award trophy was a silver letter opener in the 90s, and Barbara was granted emeritus status with Katie Krause in December 2003. Now here I want to talk about field trips. Field trips were very important over the years. They were considered an important function of continuing education and sometimes building relationships with other institutions. The Auto Museum and the Art Museum exchanged docent visits in December 1996. They included one-day trips and overnighters. Visits were often made to the State Museum and UNR campus. This one has particularly fond memories for me because I went on it. And not only did I go on it, but my parents and my mother-in-law from Australia who were visiting came with us. So some of these people are very dear friends. There were trips to Grimes Point, Empire Mine, Fort Churchill, Berlin, Bodie, Dayton, overnights to Ely, Tonopah, Sacramento, and Las Vegas. This even has some historical context. Look at Reno Air. There once was even a field trip to Carol Coleman's house. The DCB. The DCB first appeared in 1990 with this introduction by Jocelyn Ray, the first editor. She and President Evelyn Wyndham began it in March, just a duplicated stapled sheet. 5 editions that year in 2 volumes. Volume 1 and 2 appeared in the first year, but by 1992 it had the B logo, which lasted curiously until a certain new editor decided it was time to go. The 1999 editor was John Hoffer. The volume 1 and 2 had columns like quickies and quizzes. There was a docent of the month, training schedules, and have you met column. There were notices from the chalkboard, which was the name of the gift shop at the time. There was an article in an early edition about a car being stolen from the parking lot. By the way, over the years, there are anecdotes about parking frequently in the DCB. Parking tickets from UNR and please complain to parking services. Don't bring it to the door. In 2007, there was no longer parking at the front of the building. Permanent parking was to the east of the building, where it is today. In February 2007, dated parking permits were issued for each meeting. Can you imagine how that would have gone down? But it was replaced by annual permits in 2008. Around this time, there was carpooling among members advertised in the B. Parking is obviously an ongoing issue. And don't you just love our parking attendant? Here he is working for Art Town or one of our events. From volume 2 of the DCB, 10 issues ran from September through June, which continues to today. At this time, the B was printed off-site with docents doing the address labels and stamps. By 1995, the B was only mailed to those not in attendance at the meetings and to associate members, those docents who had trained, paid their dues, but no longer putting in their hours. Sometimes there were 2 to 3 editorial assistants and a calling tree by the telephone to remind members of meetings and special events, as well as a mailing committee. 2004 was the first year that emails were used, and by the time Carol Coleman became editor in 2007, the B was sent via email to everyone, and only a few published to be sent by request and available at meetings and for public record. Dan Weinberg, docent Barbara Weinberg's son, placed the DC online with a donation of computers in 2009. Where would Team Photo be without their computers today? The calling tree became defunct. Polly Thigman, longtime chairperson of the callers, was out of a job. The calendar on the back of the B first started appearing in December 2011. Barbara is prominent here in doing one of her Art Town presentations in front of the gala exhibit at the time. Editors of the B over the years have included Jocelyn Ray, Rennie Glynn, Adele Malott, John Hoffer, June Sherwood, Sandra Sorensen, Joyce Cox, who is receiving her Marjorie Fordham Award here, Carol Coleman, and our current Sandy Vickers-White. I think I've mentioned everybody there. I could not include all the editors. I did not have pictures of all of them. The June Sherwood picture is actually taken from the brochure where she is giving the tour. Receptions and galas were popular events. But there were also summer events. Here we see some of our docents kicking it up a little. Here's Kitty serving refreshments. Summer events included the folk fair that Peter inherited, which eventually turned into the ice cream social until it became a family fun day, which lasted until 2007. Here we have a brochure of the happenings at the ice cream social. Here's a later event where people dressed up. You can just make out John Hoffer and Sherry on the balcony. Treats being supplied. Sails and booths manned. The Centennial Garden Party was held in June 2004, celebrating 100 years of the Historical Society. There was a spring gathering with the Churchill County Docents and the Centennial Street Fair, organised by Bob Harmon in September in conjunction with the Washoe County Library. Streets were closed. A good time was had, but no pictures. Very sad. A brief revival of outdoor fun took place in 2016 and 2017 with History for Our Holiday on Nevada Day. For many years, we enjoyed History for the Holidays. When Jackie Clay was hired in 2000, she started the wreath giving at this event, Deck the Halls Wreath Extravaganza, as a fundraising project. Although the wreaths ended in 2005, the holiday event lasted until 2015. There are always special projects. The Nevada Rose Doll Raffle in 1985, which was donated to the Docent Council, raised $838.50 for the Nevada Historical Society textile collection. The DC contributed to the Nevada History Day competition scholarship program for a number of years from 2003, and also sent volunteers to assist in the event held annually, at least until 2011-12. The DC produced a colouring book in 1989 with so much success, it sold out its first printing. They even raised the price from $2 to $2.75. Here's a picture of the artists who gave up their rights for the educational purposes of the colouring book. There was even a plant committee from 1984. There was comment from the docents that we had to get rid of the foreign plants from our gardens. They took care of all the gardens around the Nevada Historical Society, and with assistance from the UNR Biology Department, planted the garden at the entrance of Nevada Historical Society with native species. There was a brochure published entitled The Gardens of the Great Basin. The plant committee lasted through to the 90s. Does anyone want to volunteer to get rid of the weeds that are out the front of the museum today? It's a shame we don't have a picture of their beautiful plantings. Between August 2001 and February 2002, you may have heard stories written by docents on the short-lived radio station KSRN 107.7 on a program called Radio Spots. Organised by John Hoffer, there were 10 news stories every 2 weeks at 10:40 a.m. and 3:20 p.m. The first mention of Art Town for the Docent Council was in 2002, and we had a visual arts night with history presentations via slides. The Art Town tradition has continued with tours and talks through July for several years now. It began in 2014. This past year, 2020, and to 2021, we hope, even with the pandemic, we have collaborated with the Washoe County Library to present a series of talks. We tried free Saturday tours, and in May 2016, at Free Museum Day on campus, we had 168 visitors, a thrilling day for all the docents present. The historic card sets made their appearance in 2009. They went into a second printing and are still available in the bookshop. The proceeds go to the Docent Council. Arcadia Books approached the Docent Council in January of 2010, and by January 2011, Early Reno was published thanks to the efforts of docents Carol Coleman and Dave Kennedy and others. By October 2013, over $2,000 in royalties had been paid to the Docent Council. David Lowndes published his follow-up in 2016, Reno's Heyday, 1931 to 1991, with proceeds also going to the Docent Council. In 2018, the Nevada Historical Society won a raffle from the Reno Aces, having contributed to their celebration of Reno's 150th by manning a booth manned at the Aces game. These proceeds went to update and reinstall the Reno Gallery. The Docent Council paid for a new sign as part of the Centennial celebration in 2004 and placed new signage on the doors in 2011. As a point of interest, from 2009, the annual dues changed from $10 to $15. Was there a cookbook published 2003 or 4? It was advertised, as you can see. If anyone has a copy, I'd like to see it. There was a book club in 2002. Recruitment in the 90s was easy with Roland Melton's column, frequently advertising training and publicity. That's how I came to become a docent at the Historical Society. The Docent Council has been an invigorating force at the Nevada Historical Society. Many of the earlier roles as envisaged by Dr. Bandaraga still exist. Tours, gift shop, manuscript and photo collection services, aid in the library, cataloguing. Today it is getting everything on Past Perfect and digitising the records. We may use new words and terms, but the philosophy behind it is still the same. The Docent Council was formed to provide volunteer services for the Nevada Historical Society. As we approach our 40th year of this organisation, it is a good time to remember this and the docents of past years. Thank you.